Hello, it's Tonya Duncan Ellis, author of the Sophie Washington series. Welcome back to another episode of Write This, my author interview series where I talk to different up-and-coming writers to find out about their author journey and their latest works. Today, I'm excited to introduce Christine Kendall, who will be here. She's an NAACP Image Award-nominated author, so I'm thrilled to have her here and find out all about her author journey. And thank you guys for stopping in and taking time. She'll be on in just a minute. This has been a really busy summer for me and a busy few weeks. I just came in from vacation, so it's been kind of playing catch up as I get back into my schedule. I feel like I need a vacation from the vacation, but it was a great time, so I'm glad that I had that. Thank you for joining. I see a few people who are here in some of the past episodes, so happy that you stopped by, came back on in to join, and we'll see Christine. I see that she has joined us, so I'm gonna click on here and invite her on. So I've sent you the request, Christine, and we'll have her on in just a second. But okay, great. So
hey, Tonya, how are you?
Fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Nice to be here.
Yes, and it was simple for you to get on, wasn't
it?
Right.
You don't know all the work that I had to do yesterday to figure it out, but I'm glad to see you.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to have you on and to learn about you and your work and your beautiful books.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here. It helps to break the loneliness.
Right. As a writer, we're spending a lot of time in isolation as we do our work. So it's good to have someone appear to talk to and share with.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? And tell us a little bit about your works.
Oh, yes. So it's an interesting story. Where am I from? I spent my really early years between the ages of 5 and 11 here in Philadelphia. Then my parents moved our family to South Jersey. But then as an adult, I moved back to Philadelphia, and that's where I started my career. But I want to talk a little bit about my family simply because we were a really creative lot. There were 6 kids in my family. My father played the saxophone, and my mother was a piano and organ teacher. And my mother insisted that all 6 of us take piano lessons as well as learn to play another instrument. So can you imagine there was somebody on the clarinet, the flute, the cello, the French horn. It must have been a really rough time for the neighbors. But there was always a lot of creativity in our house. And I started writing as a little girl. I remember one summer when I was 9 years old, I carried around this little notebook and I basically wrote stories all that summer long. But then I put that aside and moved on to other things.
That's cool. Now, what instrument did you play besides piano?
The clarinet, and I will admit that I played neither instrument very well. I was actually terrible on both, but I did like to write, so I was always writing little stories.
That's really neat. That was probably so much fun to have all that music and artistic energy and creativity flowing around you as you were growing up.
Yeah, it really was. It absolutely was.
Now, are any of your siblings writers also, or is it just you as a writer?
My father does some writing, but the other siblings are more into music and other things. But it's funny because I was writing as a child and I put it aside for many, many years, and I didn't really decide to devote myself to writing until about 10 years ago.
Okay. And what spurred that on? What made that happen?
Yeah, I had an interesting career for a long time where I worked with big law firms, recruiting junior lawyers as associates. And then at one point I moved into associate relations. And then I was in charge of the firm's diversity initiative before I left. So I'm not an attorney myself, but big law firms has this category of administrators that work in the firm. So I did that for many, many, many years. But then I felt I wanted to do something more creative. See, I think I was getting that call from my youth to come back to my writing. So that it wasn't it wasn't an easy decision to decide to quit this career that I had enjoyed and that I had been in for so many years, but I really, really, really wanted to do something more creative. So I took a big chance and quit my old career and said, okay, I'm going to be a writer.
Right. Now, how did your family react to that? What did they do?
People were surprised. Family and friends said, okay, you're going to be a writer. There's a lot of people out there trying to write, but okay. And I remember when I decided that I was going to write my first novel, I was so excited. And I was telling one of my brothers that I was going to write a novel. And he said, do you know how to write a novel? I said, no, but I'll figure it out. And I did figure it out.
You really figured it out because it was nominated for an NAACP Image Award. So you really
right. That was phenomenal. It was unbelievable, totally unexpected, but it was just a wonderful affirmation.
Right. Now, can you tell us a little bit about that book? What's the title and what is the storyline?
Yep, I have the book here. It's called Chants. It's a middle grade novel. I was inspired to write this story based on an article that I heard on NPR one morning. So I had left my law firm job and I always loved picture books. So I thought I was going to be writing children's picture books, and that's what I was sitting at home working on. But one day I heard this story on NPR about a mentoring program here in Philadelphia called Work to Ride, where kids in Philly who've had no exposure to horses are out in our big Fairmount Park, learning how to take care of horses, learning how to ride horses, and they have a polo team. And I heard on National Public Radio back in 2011 that this polo team had won a national championship. These were kids from the inner city who had never known horses before, and here they are winning awards playing polo. I thought this is an incredible story. So I went online. I learned more about the organization, and I found this fabulous photograph of one of the kids in the polo program. He was magnificent. He was in his polo gear. He's riding this horse. He was beautiful. He looked like there was some relationship between he and the horse. That just inspired me to start trying to write a novel. I had no intention of writing a novel, but that story just hit me in some way. I didn't know that young man, but I felt like I knew this kid and I wanted to tell his story. It's a little bit, it's almost magical how that happens. Right. And so I had signed up for a writing workshop a few months after that, and the instructor said, bring a photograph of something that touched your heart. So there's no question for me. I took the photograph of the kid on his polo pony, and that became the beginning of this book.
That is awesome. Now, have you heard of that book, Ghetto Cowboy? Is that the same area?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia does have this, there's this whole riding horses sensibility here in town. I mean, sometimes I live in West Philadelphia, and sometimes you'll see someone riding a horse down the street. I don't really know what it's all about, but there's definitely this horse thing going on in Philadelphia. So my story is not the story of the Work to Ride program. It's fiction. I made it up, but I was inspired by hearing about what these kids were doing in the park.
That is so neat. I love that. The whole movement, the idea, the creativity, and showing a person of color in that unique circumstance that we don't see in many other places.
Right. That's one of the things that struck me, that when you think of the game of polo, you think of it as an elite sport for wealthy folks, but there are kids here in the park playing polo, and they're just excellent at it. But one of the things I learned was, so I jumped into writing this, and I had no idea how to write a novel. And so, as you can imagine, I very quickly got stuck. And I had to do a lot of research because I knew nothing about horses. I knew nothing about the game of polo. And it was a lot of work. It took me 3 years to write this book, and a lot of time was spent just doing research. I had to learn how to ride a horse myself in order to say, what does the stable smell like? What does it feel like when you're on a horse? And I didn't realize any of that when I jumped into it. I just followed my heart.
Right. And that's very important for people who aren't writers to know. When writers are writing their books, we have to do a lot of research, you know, to include, to make it come alive for the reader.
Absolutely, yeah. I was fortunate in that I was in a critique group at that point, and a couple of people in the group were horse people, and so they would read the book the various sections for me, and they would tell me, yeah, you got that right, or no, this isn't quite right. Because that was my biggest fear, that I wouldn't be able to bring that feeling of what it's like to be in companionship with a horse to life. But it was very nice to hear people say, yeah, I think you got that right.
Now, how long did it take you to learn to ride a horse, or what was it like when you were riding?
Well, I probably shouldn't say that I know how to ride a horse. Let me just say I took a couple lessons. I did, in fact, get up on the horse, and I sort of went around the yard on a horse.
Right, right. To see, yeah, that sounds fun.
It was fun. And then I went to polo games, and I had to learn a lot about the game of polo. And I was fortunate in that I got to meet a polo player. So it's funny how this inspiration just led me down all these paths and helped me to learn things and helped me to learn how to write a book.
Right. And it's really just keeping your eyes open and being aware of what's going on.
Yep,
and just
absolutely.
listening to NPR.
Yes.
And I complain, my husband loves NPR, and I'm like, we have to listen to that again. So maybe I need to be listening more on NPR.
Right. Well, you never know where you're going to hear something that just sparks your interest.
Right, right. Now you have a new middle grade, or a newer middle grade. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, this is the second book, The True Definition of Neva Being. This one also was a lot of fun for me, but in a different way. This is, in some ways, I consider it a companion book to Writing Chants. It's a story about a young 12-year-old girl. It takes place here in Philadelphia. It's the story of her political awakening while she's also adjusting to the changes that are taking place in her pre-adolescent body and struggling to regain the confidence she had as a younger child. Mm-hmm. And so the inspiration for this book came actually from a memory of something that happened to me when I was actually 11 years old. I will not give the story away, but Neva's body is changing and she's just started wearing a bra. And she knows she's beautiful, she knows she's smart, and she's very proud of the way she looks, and she's proud of her developing body. And so she's so proud that she has to go to the mirror several times a day to admire herself. So you know where this is going. So she's in front of the mirror, admiring herself, turning to the right, turning to the left. But unbeknownst to her, her brother sees her and he just falls out laughing. And this actually happened to me, if you can imagine. It was humiliating. Yeah. And so I think I just tucked those feelings away for a long time and never thought about it. But when I thought about writing a book about a young girl, that memory came back. And I wanted to really think about, well, what was going on there? I don't think there's anything wrong with admiring yourself, but I think the key there was that I was seen in a private moment, but by someone else. So what do you do with that? So that whole, I call it the mirror scene. The mirror scene is what inspired me to write this book. Okay. But this book is not autobiographical. That is just that inciting incident is something that had actually happened to me.
Right, right. And a lot of kids in that age range are going through those feelings and having that angst and being self-conscious. So that really touches on that. Now, what's the other storyline in the book? I know, didn't it talk about social issues?
Yes. Neva's parents are away for the summer. They're musicians and they're off in Europe. And she and her brother Clay, who's 16, are left at home with their very traditional grandparents. And her brother, unbeknownst to everybody in the family, is politically active in their community. And so he does something that he shouldn't do. And the family becomes aware of the fact that he's involved with a local homeless organization. And so through her brother, Neva comes to understand some of the social justice issues that are occurring in her neighborhood, and actually has to figure out over the course of the book how, if in any way, she can be a part of the social justice issues in her community. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about through the book was that there's various ways of being involved in your community. There's a character in the book who's a little bit older than Neva, whose father is a community organizer, and she's very much on the front line out there in the community organizing a march. And Neva's not sure if that's the way she wants to go. And she figures out a way that she can be involved in her community and be a responsible citizen, if you will, because you can do it this way or you can do it another way. And it's interesting because the grandparents had been politically active when they were younger, but at this point, they don't want Clay and her brother to be so involved because the parents are away in Europe, and the parents had said to them, please take care of the kids. We don't want them to get in trouble. We don't want them to get hurt. So the grandparents are torn. They don't know what to do, that they're responsible for these kids over the course of the summer. And then they find out that Clay's been doing things that he didn't have permission to do. So that's another storyline there. But it's really about Neva defining herself, coming to understand who she is, and sort of being in a wonderful relationship with everyone else in her community, and realizing that you don't have to necessarily be on the front line of the march. There are many other ways that you can be making a positive contribution to the people surround you and the people that you love.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Now, I was wondering as you were speaking, this popped in my head. What did it feel like? I know you worked in a group with writing Chants. You were in some type workshop.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was your very first book. How did you find out that it was nominated for the NAACP Image Award? And what did that feel like, or what was that like?
Oh, I don't remember. I guess I got a notice from my editor, the wonderful Andrea Davis Pinckney at Scholastic, telling me that the book had been nominated. It was unbelievable because this wasn't on my mind at all. So to have this just drop on me like a bolt out of the blue was really, really exciting. It was really exciting. And I got to go to Hollywood, and I had my little traipse down the red carpet.
Oh, that is so cool.
It was
Did you
really,
see any celebrity, or were you around other
Yes, yes. Tracy Ellis Ross, all these wonderful people. Yes, it was great. And my book didn't win, but it was an honor simply to have been nominated. And at one point, they asked all of the nominees to stand, and all of our names were called, and we got called up onto the stage, and our photos were taken. And it was a wonderful, wonderful moment.
That is beautiful. And then what was your family's reaction? This is just so incredible.
Yes, proud, very, very proud.
Yeah, I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, and you followed your dream, and you followed your heart and passion, because that was very brave of you to leave your job and to step out on faith like that.
Yeah, it was a scary thing, and not an easy thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not an easy thing to do at all. And I remember leaving my old career and have somebody say, well, you know, you think at your age you're going to be a writer. I thought, wow. But maybe having people say things like that spurs you on, right? Maybe you think, look,
That is what has happened with me. Or I had a friend challenging me or fussing. I'm like, I can do this. I know I can do this. Yeah. That is a beautiful thing. Now, what projects do you have on the horizon? What are you working on now?
Well, I write for children as well as adults, and I've had a couple of short stories published in literary journals. So I love short stories. So I'm still struggling with short stories. So I'm hoping to be able to get a couple of them in shape so that I can start submitting them to journals again in the fall. And then I mentioned that I started out thinking I was going to write picture books. I love picture books, but I can't seem to get there with picture books the way I can with novels. I find that so strange. I think picture books are really hard. They're hard.
Right. I've started writing some picture book manuscripts this year. And yeah, it's like you could write a 100-page or 200-page book is easier.
And yes, in many ways it is. I think for a couple of reasons. One is you have the word limitations, right? I think nowadays picture books are suggested they should be 600 words or less. So you have to tell the story in less than 600 words. You have to be mindful of what the illustrator is going to show in the illustrations. All this is to say, I still have 3 picture book manuscripts that I've been working on for about 10 years now, and I'm still working on them.
Right.
But I'm determined sooner or later I'm going to get them right.
Yeah.
And I've also just started a 3rd middle grade novel. I'm just at this beginning of that yet. I don't really know where that's going to go.
Now, how did you find your agent? What was that process like?
Oh, that was weird. You know, I mentioned I had gone to this writing workshop where the instructor said, bring a copy of a photo of something that touched your heart. Well, I didn't say the instructor of that workshop was Andrea Davis Pinckney. So
Oh my
my word,
goodness.
I advise everybody go to writing conferences. I knew that
Right.
she was wonderful. So I went to her workshop, and when I started writing the paragraph that will become the beginning of this book, over the course of the week, she said to me at the end of the week, you have a story to tell. You are a novelist, and I'd like to see your story. So what a challenge. So after that week-long workshop, I went home and started trying to write this book. And so it took me a year to get a first draft together. I sent that first draft to Andrea Davis Pinckney, and she said, okay, I love the voice, but I need more horse. And I said, what do you mean you need more horse? And she said, I want to smell it. I want to know what it feels like. So she's the one that sent me off to horseback riding lessons and all that stuff. But after 2 more drafts, and each draft took me a full year, she said, oh, I'd like to buy this book. And I was stunned. Maybe I was just naive. I thought she was just being this wonderful coach, right? And she said, yes, I want to buy the book. So then I said, oh, I guess I need an agent. She said, yes, you need an agent. So I had gone to another writing conference in between the time that I had met Andrea at that first one, and I met an agent there. And so I had put her name on my list of people that I would reach out to if I ever got to the point where I needed an agent. So after Andrea said, yes, you need an agent now, I reached out to this woman, and I had already sold the book. So, you know, yeah, so I guess it was easy for her. Well, she said to me, you know, send me the book this weekend and I'll read it, and I'll let you know early next week whether or not I want to move forward with you. And so she did. She said, I love the story. I'd love to represent you. So that's not the way it normally happens.
No.
And some people said to me, right. And some people said to me, well, if you already sold the book, why did you need an agent? The reason I needed an agent was I didn't understand and still have very limited knowledge of the business aspect of publishing. I couldn't have worked my way through that contract or negotiated that contract on my own. And the agent really does help advise you and direct you in your career. So there's no question in my mind that the agent was needed. And even though I had already sold the book, the agent has been very, very helpful.
Right. And this is just wonderful because I feel like you're a true artist. You followed your heart and passion, and then everything just kind of lined up for you.
It's interesting how things just sort of fell into place. But you know that writing is hard. It's a lot of hard work. It really is.
Yeah, this is nice. Now, before, in the time you were working in the corporate environment or in the law firm, were you writing then, or were you?
That's interesting. No, I was not writing fiction. I did write a couple of what I now consider to be very poorly written essays about recruiting lawyers and all this kind of stuff. And most other people in my career path weren't doing that. Most other people in my position in law firms weren't doing that sort of thing. So I was writing, but I wasn't writing fiction. But I've always been a big reader, and I was always reading novels and short stories, but I hadn't been doing any fiction writing over all those years.
Right.
And I didn't go to an MFA program either, because the way things happened, things just started happening, and I found myself writing this novel. But I have gone to a lot of workshops, and I still attend workshops constantly. And the Kweli conferences every year are terrific. I think I've gone to Kweli 4 times now.
Okay.
So
I need to go to that.
And I also attended the Southampton Writers Conference out in Southampton, New York, which is a wonderful conference. I went there a couple of times, and I take writing workshops at the Center for Fiction. So I'm always looking for craft sessions that can help me continue to develop my skills.
Right. And I attended a Highlights Foundation
Yes.
writers camp, and they were saying that's like getting your own MFA, going to those things like you're getting that training.
Yes, that's the way I feel. It's almost like you're deciding when you need X, when you need Y, and you go out and find it. And I went to highlights also, and they are wonderful. When, after the first book was published, I was doing school visits, and I didn't feel like I was really doing them as well as I could. So I went to the highlights for a session I think they still give on, creating and delivering school visits. And that was extremely helpful. That was really, really good.
Okay, I need to check those out. And
it was wonderful.
Yeah. Now, Crystal Allen, another children's author, has joined us in. So, hey. So glad you could take time and join us. Now, we have a few more minutes left, and I like to close with questions from some of our viewers and participants.
Okay.
If anyone has questions, put them in the comments, and we will respond to them. We'll have Christine answer them. But anything else you want to share? Any advice you want to give to aspiring authors, those who are interested in taking that path that you've taken?
People, I guess everyone may have heard this already, but it's worth repeating. Read, read, read. You learn so much from reading, not just reading fiction, but nonfiction, poetry, adult stories, children's stories. I learned so much from reading. And I realized when I was struggling with that first novel, I had some notions as to what constitutes a good story because all the reading that I've done, I knew intuitively what the elements of a good story were. So I would encourage people to read as much as they can. And I also feel very strongly about going to writing conferences because that helped me immensely.
Right. And I find I just love the camaraderie, and you feel like you're with kindred spirits and other people who get you and understand same things that you like. So, and
you have that community, people, and everyone there is supporting you. It's really, really good. And maybe another thing I should say is learn how to accept criticism because you really do need feedback from other folks. And it's constructive criticism. People are not, it shouldn't be a personal attack. People are not saying that something isn't working because they don't like you. It's not personal at all. They're reading your work and giving you their honest feedback, and you grow as a result of that.
Right. And I found as a writer that sometimes I'll think, I'm tired, it's done. And then I knew I should have done something. I'm like, I don't feel like doing that. And then when I get with my critique partners, it's pushing me on to make things even better and reinforcing doubts I may have had in my own mind too sometimes.
Right.
Now, someone asked a question about a course on writing, and we mentioned the Highlights Foundation courses. Are there any other classes that you would recommend?
I would highly recommend Kweli Journal. Laura Pigram is the editor of the journal, and she sponsors 2 writing conferences every year. One, I believe, is called The Color of Children's Literature. That's for children's lit authors. And the other is the International Literary Festival. I've gone to both, but her conference is wonderful. There are keynotes, there are breakout sessions, there's opportunities to meet with editors and agents. It's just, it's wonderful. I've gone 4 times.
Okay. And Kweli is that Kweli?
Exactly, Kweli. And the Children's Lit Conference is, I think, every spring.
Okay. So that's something to check out. That's great. Well, Christine, I'm so happy that you could join me and just excited to learn about your books. I haven't read Writing Chants, so now I want to get that and read that. That ought to be made into a movie like the other one. Hey,
well, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like such an exciting story, and just to see the people playing polo and learning about that would be really interesting.
I had a lot of fun. It was a wonderful introduction to writing. I still can't believe
introduction
and then
NAACP image.
Right.
I know. Yeah, you had a great introduction. Now, where can people find you, Christine? Are you?
Yes, I have a website, www.christinerkendall.com. And I have to say, I'm not really active on social media, but I do have a Twitter account. What is it? Hashtag CHR Kendall.
Okay. And where do you prefer people to buy your books? Is it your website or?
Yeah, well, not on my website. I would refer people, first of all, to their local independent bookstores. I think it's so important that we support them, but also places like Books A Million. And then, of course, you can get it Barnes and Nobles and Amazon, but I would strongly suggest people check out their independent bookstores first.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for this time, and I'll be seeing you later this evening.
Exactly. Thank you, Tonya. This was really fun.
Okay. Thank you, Christine. And
Thanks.
thank you all for joining us.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.